past weekend, South Africa's famous political cartoonist, Zapiro, was signing the latest compendium of his cartoons for the past 12 months at various exclusive bookstores. And the day before, I got some fantastic news from Patrick Maduna, who is one of the whistleblowers I've interviewed, tell me that the chair of Shell South Africa, Mr. Hlonopizwe Justice Mtolo, has effectively been told to resign. Now, this is another great victory for whistleblowers because it came 2 months after Patrick went public with disclosures of alleged fraud and illegal BBBEE fronting by certain people associated with both Shell and Barloworld. And Patrick explains all that in the video that I uploaded on the 28th of September. And you can just click on the link above, which actually will take you to that, and maybe you want to watch that first, because this will make a hang of a lot more sense if you've got the gist of what that's about. So I thought it would be a good idea to take Patrick out of his safe house to Cresta shopping centre to meet my good friend Zapiro, so we could share with him the encouraging news that Shell International appear to be taking Patrick's disclosures seriously and are taking action. Now, Patrick's going to tell us of the significance of all of that, but before he does that, let me read the description of the video interview I did 2 months ago, which kind of sums things up for you. I say, Patrick Maduna has spent more than a year in a secure lockdown in fear of his life. He has sent his family away to safety elsewhere, and he has had to cease cycling with his friends because he doesn't want any of them to be accidentally hit by a bullet intended for him. In fact, he was telling me that he normally cycles a 94.7, which has just happened this past weekend in Johannesburg, but for the last 2 years he hasn't been able to do that. He has already survived one attack and his car has bullet holes to prove it. In that previous interview he explained why he's become a target for retaliation and why he is standing his ground in alleging that Shell and Barloworld have wittingly or unwittingly initiated a BBBEE enterprise that is allegedly defrauding Shell and failing the intended beneficiaries of Lociware, which is the trust that was set up as the fronting exercise, and Patrick was a trustee of that until he was fired. Patrick has lodged an application in the Labour Court in Johannesburg to argue that his dismissal by Lociware is an automatic unfair dismissal of a whistleblower because he made bona fide protective disclosures of wrongdoing to 4 different authorities. It's taken a long time, but now, at last, the Labour Court on the 27th of September, they condoned his application, so the matter is now legitimately before the courts, and Kieran Ryan of MoneyWeb has reported on it, and you can click on this link to read that article. The case is only likely to be set down another year or so, but Patrick and his family cannot wait another year before he gets redress. In this instance, justice delayed would not simply be justice denied, it would be injustice compounded. Well, I was rather pleased to find that that video upload 2 months ago has gone somewhat 10 times more views than I normally get. So clearly people are taking note of it. And we were hoping that Shell Global, who had recently appointed a long-serving executive, Mr. Ian Scott, as vice president, to shake things up in South Africa, would intervene with urgency on the matter and respond appropriately to the protected disclosures Patrick has made to them. The statement of case can be viewed in the link also on that video if you want to get the chapter and verse. So here we are now, a chance, as I promised in that video, to do a next installment. Patrick, how did you feel when people started calling you last Thursday to tell you that Hlonopizwe Justice Mtolo has resigned? So I suppose the first question I've got to ask is, has justice been done?
For me, no, justice is not done, but him personally as justice, he is done at Shell. Yeah, okay. To me, when the employees of Shell started calling me John and telling me this, it also revived the hope, and it made me understand that people actually have been seeing this unjust things that were happening to not only me, also the other employees who never benefited from this program, that we were just used as stooges. So they also feel for us. They also realized after I think I came clean to say I cannot just make accusations that are unfounded. So I think the Shell employees, most of them actually understand what is really happening, and they were also happy to tell me that, because nobody was sad. They were all happy. Say, Patrick, yes, this is what is happening. The bridge is falling. The bridge is falling. And I was like, okay.
There was some sort of announcement made internally, because it's still not public knowledge yet about this fact.
So yes, there was an internal announcement where I think they have a newsletter that they probably share internally. They pinned that information, and which was around the early mornings of Thursday, and then around before noon, I think Mr. Mtolo had to address Shell and the Shell employees as a business and tell them this is the decision he has taken to go and pursue other businesses. On the same sentence, he also mentioned that he's invested a lot of time with Shell, which is like 9 years, and he didn't want to leave Shell, but due to personal reasons he has to leave. That's what I'm told. And unfortunately, I'm also told that he was asked about me, to say Patrick has made some damning allegations. What is happening to that? And his answer to that was that there is ongoing investigations within Shell. There's also ongoing investigations with the SAPS.
Was that Mr. Mtolo telling them, or Ian Scott?
No, they say it was Mr. Mtolo telling them to say.
When Ian Scott was there too, I presume.
Yes, Mr.
Because he was brought in July, deployed to South Africa, basically to subordinate the chair and the board and everyone to his basic directives. And he seems like he's busy doing something. Is that your interpretation?
Yeah, my interpretation is just simply that Ian Scott is actually dealing with this, with all these issues effectively and decisively.
So that we did now finally get some response to your disclosure made to Shell Global. They then obviously, they've got a few other things to worry about.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not only your disclosures, there's this disaster that they've had with trying to get this license for seismic exploration on the Wild Coast. I know their fuel retail section, which Mr. Mtolo is responsible for, has been in very narrow margins and not doing well at all. So their business is in trouble on several fronts. Our hope was that Mr. Scott would be coming to basically sweep clean, try and see what could be done to get Shell back on track in South Africa and somehow to redeem its reputation, which internationally is not very good either.
Absolutely. And again, a lot of people's works are at stake. So I think Mr. Ian Scott's reputation is known. He's been to Nigeria to fix Nigeria.
Appalling story. Yeah.
And corruption as well. So he came here to South Africa, I think, to also clean it up. So we hope after Mr. Scott has cleaned this mess up, Shell will go back to being a reputable, trusted, honest, and respected brand that every citizen in the country will be happy to do business with. Yes.
I mean, that's the scandal what happened in Nigeria, the death of Ken Saro-Wiwa, and I just hope that it is possible, because I mean, there's a different way that they can do business.
You see, what differs in this corporate cultures is that Shell is an international company, it's a Dutch company. So they bring their own culture in how they do things within how they operate their business. And I think one of the best way to probably influence and do things in a manner that talks to that culture in that country is to implement systems and controls that will actually be desirable for that environment. Because when you bring an international standard in a certain country, some of those countries it's not desirable.
Well, in South Africa we've got a Bill of Rights which entrenches environmental rights in Section 24, and it talks about the best interests of present and future generations must not be compromised by things we do in the present. So that could be a very useful starting point. And my frustration working within the extractives and trying to challenge mining companies and that is to say, for goodness sake, guys, play by the rules. Show yourself genuinely committed to a future that is actually beneficial to people and the environment. Show yourself committed to renewables, to some sort of a business model that doesn't trash the planet.
Absolutely.
It's common practice, and the thing which worries me for when people get fired, that they are scapegoated. But what else do you think Ian Scott needs to now do to ensure that justice is done to you and for your family?
It's not only me. I think it's also just to boost morale as well to the Shell employees, except for me, as well as our South African economy. I would be glad to see him implementing maybe a forensic audit into what I have reported and what has transpired financially from Lociware and Shell. Just conduct have a forensic audit. It will root out all those people, because then it will show you where the money has been channeled and to who are the beneficiaries of that money.
But it's also going to potentially increase the risk to you.
Absolutely.
Criminal syndicates that seem to be running this country don't want to see whistleblowers succeed. They're going to want to send a message to deter any other potential whistleblowers from speaking out. Now that for me is just such a ominous reality, and it's something which I fear that the state and the government, despite all the lip service they pay, don't seem to be taking seriously enough at just how important it is to protect whistleblowers. I mean, you had Justice Zondo himself showing his intense frustration at the fact that whistleblowers are still not supported, encouraged or incentivized. I know you've been advised by a security expert that it would be a big mistake for you to drop your guard, because the investigations are going to now reveal other things which you might not even know about and weren't involved in, but they just want to try and put a cap again on it. Yeah. Of course, we're not going to advertise what additional security measures you're going to take, but what do you want the public to know so that you and your family can sleep a bit more peacefully at night? You know, besides the fact that you've now got Zapiro, I just love the fact we saw him at work making a lovely sort of image of this hand of a whistle. So besides having people like Zapiro, you know, who people will back off from because they know his reputation is so strong, what else do we need to do as ordinary citizens to make sure that you are not further retaliated against in your family?
What people could do, I think, it's an individual commitment, John. So you definitely cannot, bring this idea to say you must do this. It's just people's personal, individual, choice to stand for the truth, represent the truth, and support the truth. Not only to support me, we have houses like the Whistleblower House. That's how you can contribute to assisting people like me, assisting people like other whistleblowers. Those entities are there to serve the best interest of those people who have come out. I would say probably companies, not only individuals, companies, more so the JSE listed companies, if they were to pledge a certain incentive to institutions like whistleblower houses, those institutions are the same institutions that will therefore at least take care of us. So other people, even though they want to come out and tell the truth, they can't, because they're on their own. But if these companies or individuals who are not affected today, as yet, will actually have a buffer if they start investing in institutions like a Whistleblower House. Even you pledge to contribute maybe 100 Rand or 10 Rand a month. That is more, because if you combine that with everyone, it will make a lot of money and it will make a difference in future. So I would say if that was the case, I would really think it that way.
In the video that we uploaded, the previous one, somebody had a comment on it and said, why don't you make a plea for funding and donations, because people will want to give. So let me make good that neglect and say, well, Patrick's given you good reason to make a pledge to the Whistleblower House. Put up their link now so you can check out what they do, and because that's been such an encouragement to me to see how there is gradually now some momentum building for, at least from the private sector and from the general public, to actually do what the government should be doing, but is just so pathetically dragging its feet on it. And Zapiro's got a few cartoons which actually describe that in his book. Patrick, yeah, so what's the next steps for you? I mean, you need to get back into society. You don't want to have to spend your life hiding. Absolutely. I mean, it's really the thing, when I took you to Cresta Mall shopping centre, I was conscious of just how you saw this place, the space, and all the people. How did it leave you feeling?
Like I said to you, John, I remember at the mall, I said, when you are in confinement, it's like everything has stopped. Once you come out, you realize life is going on. It's like nothing has stopped. And I really, really, really want to go back to my life and live my life as normal as I possibly can, and also have time with my family, go back to see my children, because I've also stopped seeing everyone close or related to me, because I may never know who is watching me and who is following me. But yeah, it sucks.
And you want to be employed now. You want to earn an income.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You've got. I mean, as I've got to know you, I think I said it in the previous video. You exemplify the sort of qualities that a good organisation would want to employ and encourage and incentivize. Whereas in fact, you were actually retaliated against and intimidated for exemplifying the very values that will build this country. Truth, honesty, transparency, accountability, all those values.
True.
And it just astounds us that companies don't seem to see which side their bread is ultimately buttered.
I think it's power, John. Power suppresses the truth. Yeah, where there is power, if the powers are not related to the truth, then the truth will always suffocate, because they will suppress it. That is why you will see people like myself, Cynthia, and others in this kind of conditions, which are really, really, really inhuman and not acceptable.
Yeah, in fact, as I've sermonized in my previous video, and this is such a simple point. He said, power has no defense against the truth, because it's covering things up. So all it can do is try and put a lid on it. But my experience is increasingly that what we now need are true leaders, not bosses. Somebody posted on Facebook a lovely post which said, a leader creates comfort and security. A boss is somebody who creates anxiety in their employees. Anyway, I'm sure that as this word gets out, there will be good news to report, so that you don't have to scrimp and scrape and suffer. Because you're a self-reliant person, and it must be terribly dehumanizing for your own sense of dignity to have to virtually become a beggar.
Absolutely. Coming out is like committing a career suicide. Taking this platform and taking this path in life, it's completely like committing a career suicide. And by the way, nobody cares until it's them. Then they want everyone to care.
That's right. Yeah. So, well, thanks so much, Patrick. I just wanted to, as I did in the previous video, I want to just frame this even more widely in a wider context. Now, I wanted Patrick to meet Zapiro because he has been a huge inspiration to me. In fact, both of them have been, but Zapiro has been the guy that's sort of gone before. And he's encouraged me and nerved me for the long ordeal that I've had to endure when I was served with the defamation suits 7.5 years ago. I talk about it also in the previous video. But Zapiro and I had the same lawyers, and we were able to successfully, in Zapiro's case, fend off a massive lawsuit by former President Jacob Zuma, who didn't like the way he was being satirized and lampooned in Sapiro's cartoons. And of course it completely backfired on him. So what he did then is widen the space for people to speak out. But that is about cartooning, it's about caricature, it's about satire. I felt it was also important that people that have a deeply considered response to what was happening must also be free to respond to these issues. And people who didn't have quite the skill of a Zapiro. Zapiro was a target of what we might call a SLAM suit, strategic litigation against media. I was a target of a SLAPP suit, strategic litigation against public participation. And Patrick has been a target of what we call a SLOW suit, strategic litigation on whistleblowers. So they're all basically variants of the same toxic or noxious kind of contagion in our society of trying to suppress the truth. And I'm bringing it up again now, my own experience, because I went to see Zapiro as well to share some other good news with him. And I can also now make this announcement in this video that in the wake of the mineral sands judgment of November last year, the mining company Mineral Commodities Limited and its subsidiary Mineral Sands Resources and a third plaintiff, Zamile Qunya, have now signed a settlement agreement with all of us respondents. It's a bit complicated because it involved 3 separate actions that were all consolidated, and I will include a link in the description of this video for you to go to get chapter and verse about that. But the first one was against 3 people who were sued for public statements they had made with respect to Mineral Sands Resources and Zamile Qunya in respect to the Tormin Mineral Sands project on the Western Cape coast, and that was Christine Riddell, Tracy Davies and Davine Witbooi. Then there was one brought by Mineral Commodities and Mark Caruso, basically the same group of companies, the same individuals, against Cormac Cullinan and Mzamo Dlamini with respect to statements they had made on a radio program with respect to what was happening with the Kolobeni Mineral Sands project on the Wild Coast. The third action, which was actually the first to occur, was against me for a number of public statements I'd made in which Mineral Commodities and Mr. Caruso were suing me for 5 million rands each. Now, they are similarly worded statements, so for each of the actions, and I will put a link, as I say, below to the full joint statement. So let me just read the one that pertains to me. Quote, in 2016, Mineral Commodities Limited, MRC, and Mark Caruso issued summons against John Clark for a number of defamation claims in the Western Cape High Court under case number 12543/2016. MRC and Mr. Clark have entered into an agreement, the terms of which are confidential, in terms of which MRC's claims against Mr. Clark have been settled. The agreement does not include a settlement of Mr. Caruso's claims against Mr. Clark. There's a similarly worded statement with respect to the claims against Mzamo Dlamini and Cormac Cullinan. Now, the reason Mark Caruso is not party to the settlement agreement is, and I'm speculating, that it's probably because he was, similar to Mr. Justice Mtolo's situation with Shell, also asked to resign from his position at that stage as the executive chair of MRC. Now, all I can say is that I did reach out to Mr. Caruso in a direct approach, without lawyers, negotiate if we'd be prepared to, call it quits. And he said he would only do so if I apologized for all the statements I'd made. So I told him that to do so would mean that the statements were then implicitly false. And they weren't. And the fact that MRC has subsequently fired him lends credence to them. So Mark Caruso wants the matter to go to trial. I respect his right to do so, but his prospects of success are even more faint in the light of the Concord Mineral Sands judgment, which effectively outlawed SLAPP suits, and the judgment that preceded that in the Cape High Court, where Judge Judith Goliath was pretty certain, in her view, that Mr. Caruso's actions against me specifically had all the hallmarks of a SLAPP suit. I'll put a link to that judgment as well, because it's some really interesting perspective on the matter. What I did in fact say to Mr. Caruso, or through his lawyers, because he wouldn't talk to me directly, is that I wasn't prepared to apologize, but I was prepared to actually give him some acknowledgement and thanks. And I wasn't being facetious. That was because the whole experience of having had that defamation suit and having to go through that long ordeal gave me more of a visceral understanding of what whistleblowers go through. The only difference being that I'd signed up for this, more or less, because I'm a social worker, it was my professional duty, and so journalists likewise. Whistleblowers don't. They turn up for work, they see wrongdoing, they look to what they can do, they look at their policies, and they make disclosures. And then they get retaliated against, left high and dry, and persecuted. So in that sense, what Mark Cruz has done to me has given me a bit of a sense of being able to be more supportive to people like Patrick. So I genuinely feel that that actually is beneficial. And in fact, Ursula, Patrick's wife, said to me, her father used to say to her, God kan 'n reguit lyn trek met 'n krom stok. Which translated sounds so much better in Afrikaans, but in English it means God can use unholy instruments for holy purposes. We mustn't think of ourselves to have to be somehow perfect before we can make a contribution. I mean, all of us have got frailties and limitations. What I see as my job with whistleblowers is to make sure that those with power don't make the whistleblower feel that it's their fault for what the trouble they've got into. And that's the ubiquitous situation I've seen with so many whistleblowers, is that even if there are things that you would regret having done, for goodness sake, it's about embracing the deeper truth that is not yet disclosed and emergent. And as you engage in trusting relations with people, you will get the confidence and the resilience to be able to find your way into negotiating your way forward. And I do believe that the tide is changing, but ultimately it has to get better. And I would want to just encourage folk not to lose heart. Patrick, any last thoughts that you have in contribution to encouraging whistleblowers?
One that I could emphasize on, John, is the whistleblower house funding, because at the end of the day, the whistleblowers actually suffer financially, emotionally, and otherwise. Some actually have all their assets taken away from them, their families also. But it would be to say, if those who are keen and willing to assist with whistleblowers is to help fund those institutions like whistleblower houses, so that they can take care of those people who needs to be bailed out in bad times.
Yeah, and I'd endorse that and say thanks so much, Patrick, and let me rush to go and get this thing edited and uploaded.
Well, folk, as I was doing the edit, obviously a whole lot of thoughts started coming to mind as to what I just want to say by way of bringing closure to this particular installment. Well, this is clearly not the end, but hopefully for Patrick it's the beginning of the end of his ordeal. I've emailed Ian Scott, and hopefully my next installment will be an interview with him, where he can give his perspective on everything. Because Shell is under the cosh on a number of fronts. I mean, a film has just been released called Wild Coast Warriors that tells the story of how the Amadiba community of the Wild Coast successfully obtained an interdict to stop Shell's seismic explorations along the Wild Coast. It has been screened in Durban, and there are 2 screenings scheduled for Cape Town and other places. I haven't seen it yet, but the thought occurs to me that maybe Ian Scott, Patrick and I can go and see the film together when it gets to Johannesburg and have a chat about the issues afterwards. As to whoever is running the show at Lociware, I see your attorney, Sizwe Kai, has made a statement that Patrick was fired from the company for serious acts of misconduct following an independent disciplinary process. Well, I know it was anything but a fair disciplinary process. He also suggests that in the mediation process at the CCMA, Patrick failed to disclose the reasons for his dismissal to this commissioner and still obtained a certificate of non-resolution from the CCMA. Well, he was never obliged to do that because he needed the protection of the courts precisely to certify that he was making a protected disclosure. And that's the whole point of the Protected Disclosures Act. It's there to ensure that people don't suffer occupational detriment when they find that there's wrongdoing by people in authority, and when their bosses actually can't be relied on, well, they've had to find alternative recourse. Now, Patrick did go to higher authority, and they are now acting. And finally, in doing the edit and researching the background of Mr. Hlonopizwe Justice Mtolo, I need to say to him and his family that whilst our first duty as social workers is to challenge social injustice, which is what I have been doing with respect to the way whistleblowers are treated, our second duty is to show respect for the human rights and dignity of everyone, and also to show care and concern for everyone's well-being. And we try to recognize the importance of human relationships, especially when there are very divergent and conflictual interests at play. And with names like Hlonopizwe, which means respect, and together with justice, I can just imagine how absolutely devastating this whole experience is for you and for your family. And I have considerable empathy for you. So please feel free to contact me in professional confidence if you wish, and let's see if some restorative justice outcome may yet be possible. But there has to be accountability to Patrick and his family.